Hi, and welcome to the Scale Now US Market Entry and Gaining Traction Fast webinar. It's really great to be with you today. We've got a great crowd, and what we see for as companies enter the US is wherever they're coming from, more often than not, they're coming from a smaller market to the US market, which is totally good and all great. The issue is really how to do it, because it's so much bigger than what so many are used to, and being able to get focused, to have a plan that makes sense and is efficient and ultimately is successful is the bottom line of the process. So the goal of this webinar today is to help give some insights as to what might be a good plan to help create traction and to build a scalable model. So I'm going to share my slides here and we'll hop into it. So we really do look forward to your questions, look forward to certainly conversations after this, and feel free to reach out with anything at all you have a question about. So Scale Now, US Market Entry, and Gaining Traction Fast. So let's hop in, and again, the whole idea here, and really all we're focused on in this webinar, is to look at the process of growing revenue, about creating customers, and again, building a repeatable process, because until you build a repeatable process, you can't scale. And there's no point in hiring salespeople or lots of salespeople until you do that. Otherwise, and the point there is really, you'll turn them over. In the US, the sales market, hiring salespeople is very competitive. So if salespeople don't see success fairly quickly, and if there's a lot of friction to that system, they're probably going to look for opportunity elsewhere. And obviously that's not good for you. It's not good for them. It is definitely a lose-lose situation. So again, the idea here is to build that strong system and that strong pathway to good and sustainable growth. So our agenda, real simple. We're going to talk about the big barriers. We're going to talk about the 3 phases, and this is a process that we've learned and developed over time. And we'll get into some steps for success. And at the end, and big hook to stay to the end, is we've got a bonus, a tool that will really, I think, help you quite a bit. So, and it's accessible. You actually know about it now. It's just about using the tool in a different way. So, it's when we look at market entry, and really anything, the first thing is really to kind of agree on a goal. And here I'm going to share a goal, or 2 goals that at least we find helps direct the effort. You may edit this and find other goals and so on, and that's all good, but it's really hard to develop a plan until you have an outcome you're looking for. So we're going to share 2. One is to quickly and efficiently build traction, and second is to create a repeatable sales process. And if you sort of, and why I've kind of mentioned repeatable sales process a couple times, if you sort of think of the as you come into the market and you're looking to create that first customer or to create that first sale, the process or the path that you go through to create that first sale is often ugly. It's if you think of it as like a dirt path, that dirt path is probably going over some hills. It's going, crossing a river. It's, going underground. It's just, it's just not direct. It's not straightforward. And if you look incrementally as to what you're trying to do, over time, you're looking to make that dirt path a straight path. Still dirt, still maybe a few bumps along the way, but at least straight. And then, kind of the next phase is you're looking to pave that and put lines on it so that it's easy for one person to sort of stay on the path. Maybe put some guardrails on it and so on. And that's sort of, you're kind of gaining traction in that phase. And then finally, to scale, you really want to create the Autobahn. In other words, you create, an infinite number of lanes and those lanes represent salespeople who can be effective in terms of engaging and enrolling new customers. So that's sort of the idea, is just think of that metaphor of dirt path to Autobahn is really where we're trying to go. So there are a couple of big barriers, and these are ones that we don't hear talked about a lot that I think we see a fair amount, and are maybe things to just be aware of as you're thinking about coming into the US. So number one is time. Time is a huge enemy of US market entry. If you think about, you have all of your resources, and often people think of money as the primary resource, but there's a lot more than that. There's your investors, there is your leadership team and your critical team members, there are your customers, there are your vendors, there is your family, and there are just all sorts of different stakeholders in the process. That team has a finite shelf life. It's kind of like fruit at the market. It will, given enough time, it will spoil. And so, that team has been developed, and they're committed for a certain period of time. And for each one, it's going to be a little bit different. Some will be committed for 6 months, for 12 months, for 24 months, whatever the case is. But if you don't see success in a certain amount of time, that team will begin to dissolve. That team will begin to go and find other opportunities, other ways to invest their time, their resources, their love, their effort, and so on. And so being cognizant of time is important, and that can play, you can kind of look at that in a variety of ways. If you're, we see often companies coming in and not being well focused, and also kind of going after larger customers. And so what does that create? If you're unfocused, you're certainly going to dilute your effort. If you're going after larger customers, they take longer, and quite often they look for reference customers, which the smaller customers can be really good for that. So be really cognizant of time, and how do you create some, what we would call in the US base hits, a baseball metaphor, but small wins, incremental wins that reinforce all of your stakeholders' decisions to commit to your success. And the more of that, those small base hits, those small wins that they see, the more committed they become. And the more, it's so good in so many different ways, but time can work for us. It can certainly work against us. So be aware of that. The second barrier is one that actually I don't see talked about a lot, but is also a huge challenge. And, it's funny, ego is really important. We wouldn't get out of bed. We wouldn't certainly cross an ocean without having some ego. So ego's critical. The challenge where ego comes in, and we'll maybe even dig into this a little bit more later in the webinar, but when you think of ego, if we're too confident, and again, confident, I'm defining as, sort of thinking of that we have all the answers, particularly as relates to, do we know what the customer wants? Do we know who our customer is? Do we know what messaging will attract and compel them to action? And, what we'll find is that the stronger our certainty about that is, the more challenging our learning will be. And ultimately building a nimble system for market entry, a nimble system around your marketing and communication and customer acquisition is going to be critical. And the more you can remove ego from that process and actually make it data-driven, the stronger you'll do. So yeah, certainly Einstein's formula there works pretty well. Ego equals 1 over knowledge. So yeah, let's make sure that we have kept our ego in check. Again, critically important for having confidence to cross an ocean. But there's sort of a limit to ego's usefulness once we get into the market. So good. We'll talk about this a little bit more as we go. So I'm just going to highlight this three-phased approach, and it's good to look at this. We found in three phases because it allows you to incrementally sort of benchmark where you are and kind of what tools, what resources can aid you as you go through them. So the first we look at is phase 0, and this is really looked at as pre-entry. And you might even think of this as testing before you invest, or sort of pre-investment to validate or invalidate your various hypotheses. So you're going to, create a variety of assumptions that need to be tested. And there are a variety of strategies for doing this, but ultimately, you want, before you make significant investment and whatnot, there's a lot you can do from your home market and maybe it's working through partner hypotheses. And kind of parallel to that is also valuable is building your ally and partner network, because this will be also, besides the testing you do in terms of identifying some, the ally and partner network will also be able to give you a variety or build your intelligence about the marketplace. It will also begin to potentially help you identify channel partners and strategic partners who can be valuable for you. But the more of that you can set up before you depart or before you begin putting feet on the ground, the stronger you'll be, because all of this information, you can do all the research you want, but until you ask actual customers questions, until you ask them for a commitment, it's really hard to be certain about what kind of what reception you'll get and what kind of traction you can get. And you really want to, again, the US market is massive, and you really want to be prepared to be super focused. And that could be targeting certain buyer persona types. That could be targeting certain industries, certain geographies. There are all sorts of demographics that you want to look at to really narrow your focus, because not only is it more efficient from a sales standpoint, but also having those reference customers in certain verticals or certain geographies and so on are what make it easier for the next customer, for customer 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to come on board, because you already have on board somebody that they know. So again, phase 0, test your initial market hypotheses. There are a variety of strategies behind that. Do you go to existing customers or have US operations? Do you sort of look at a specific segment and test in that segment, and so on? And ultimately that is somewhat situational and can be developed specifically for kind of each company, and then building that ally and partner network. So phase 1, so we've done phase 0, phase 1, really looking at that first 12 months of being in market. Obviously you want to establish initial traction and then map the steps to create a customer. So that the idea is to create that repeatable process. We're going from the ugly, dirt road to a straight dirt path. And so, yeah, that ugly and, dirt path that goes over hills and through rivers and so on, to a straight path that at least one person can begin repeating, and they can, it may not be perfect, but, at least it's getting there. And then hopefully by the end of this phase, you've been able to put some pavement and lines on it, so it's easy for that person to continue to make those sales and create traction. And obviously at that point, you're ready to begin expanding and to begin scaling. So once you have that straight paved road, nice and smooth, nice and flat, then you can begin building out the Autobahn, adding sales teams, adding sales regions, adding, a variety of different, sort of sales efforts that will drive the business very quickly and drive revenue very quickly. So as you build the sales team, obviously you've got to have, the infrastructure behind them, whether it's, a CRM, customer relationship management platform, but essentially something to be able to track and catalog opportunity and relationships, and really building that process to allow you to scale quickly. So we've looked quickly at those 3 steps or at those 3 phases. Now talking about steps to success. And so early on we talked about being focused, and focus is it's actually something. It's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, variable in companies being successful coming into the U.S. Again, it's a large market. It is a competitive market, and it's very easy to see the shiny objects and begin chasing opportunity, and as opposed to having a real systemic way to get going. So you may have not figured this out yet, but I'm actually giving you this webinar today from a boat. So I will give maritime metaphors periodically. So this metaphor is going to be, this section is, I'm going to give you a pretty strong maritime metaphor. Before we do that, I want to share with you something that really helps focus it. One of the things we see happen is that companies, and this happens with U.S. companies as well, is there tends to be a sense of prospect creep. In other words, how we define a prospect tends to expand over time. And we found it's really important to be very disciplined in terms of who you call a prospect and who you call a suspect. So a suspect is a pre-prospect. They're unqualified in terms of fitting 3 key criteria. And in order for someone to be a prospect, they need to fit these 3 criteria. And so if we're going to be friends, we need to kind of agree on this. So a prospect has to have a need. They need to have money. And one that a lot of people forget is they need to be urgent. So they need to, the easiest way to remember this is actually a quick need money now. If you can remember that sort of those 3 words, it's really easy to continue to be focused on who your prospects are. So everything we do from a standpoint of marketing should be aligned with identifying and nurturing relationships with people, companies who have a need, who have money, and who are urgent. They have to have all 3, or they're not a prospect. They may be a prospect in a week or in a month or in 5 years. Identify people who are prospects now. And that is how you make a sales pipeline with very strong velocity. Otherwise, you end up with a sales pipeline that has it just has a lot of dead wood in it, and that will just clog things up. It'll end up wasting your salespeople's time, and obviously none of us at the early stages can afford that. So let's talk about the process of market entry, making this efficient, and those steps. So, the idea is, and we see this a lot when companies come in, is it's like they went to Las Vegas and they're in and they're just going to make some really big bets. They go to the big trade show in their industry. They go to use a variety of media and tools that are sort of very expensive, and they're doing it without a lot of knowledge around who the customer is, where they are, and what language, what communication will attract and convert them. So we found it much better to make at the early stages, and this happens in phase 0 for sure, and phase 1 for sure, and that would be to make small, local, and frequent bets. And so the frequency is something that's really important. So if you go to an annual trade show for your industry, that only happens once a year. And so there in the US, there are all sorts of opportunities that happen every week, every day, certainly every month in every industry and every sub-industry in your region. And so it's really about how does that ecosystem get leveraged so that you can gain knowledge, gain relationships, gain customers, and create that repetition. Think of the early stages. You probably can't handle, your operation can't handle a lot of new customers at one time. And so this isn't about volume, it's about traction and learning. And that is going to be much more efficiently done and much more quickly done if you get sort of a high velocity of iteration in terms of your approach. The easiest way to do this is through A/B testing. So, the idea that you can, I think, a lot of people are familiar with A/B testing online. You change a message, you have a different call to action, you put different inbound, you use a variety of different inbound marketing techniques to test assumptions around what your audience is interested in, what your buyer persona is interested in. And from that, you can begin measuring differences between various techniques, various targeting, various messages, various call to actions, and so on. And from that, then you can begin best practicing what you're doing. And so having a methodology to do that is key. And so here's the maritime metaphor. So the first, if you think of what a fisherman does before they leave their home, they basically answer 3 questions. The first question is, what do I want to catch? Now that seems like an easy thing to sort of answer. Most fishermen within 10 seconds can say what fish they're aiming at or what fish they want to catch in a given day. But it's really not that simple of a response, especially when you realize that there are 34,000 species of fish in the world, plus countless number of subspecies. So when you really think about the strength of responding to what fish you want to catch, is you're actually saying there are 33,999 species of fish that you don't want to catch. And that's the brilliance of targeted marketing, is that you can begin, if you know what fish you want to catch, you can actually effectively answer the next 2 questions that the fisherman needs to answer, and in fact, help them, or what helps them be successful at catching the target fish. The second question is, where am I going to go fishing? So once I know I want to catch a tuna or a striped bass or a salmon or something like that, then there's only of all the places I could go fishing, there are only a few places where those specific fish are, and only certain times a year, certain depths of water, and all that. There's a variety of variables that I can then begin to look at to optimize where I'm going to fish. And of course, the third question that the fisherman answers is, what bait am I going to put in the water? And that bait is what attracts and compels that fish or that target to take action or to bite, which is ultimately what we want. Our marketing, the result of all of our marketing, is to create conversations, is to create meetings with generally with executives, with business professionals who can make decisions, who have budgets. And so obviously our target here is all in a B2B sense, in a strategic and conceptual type sale. And so we want to figure out what fish we want to catch, then and that of course informs what persona we're targeting, the specific individual and their concerns, their challenges, their profile, and that really narrows down how we fish, and then what water we're going to be fishing in, where we're going to fish, and we pick a place, a region, and then what bait, what is the actual language that we're going to use or offer that we're going to use that will bring that fish in, that persona in, and get them to ask questions, get them to have a conversation, get them to begin some level of awareness and interest. And from there, obviously, we nurture that until we get a meeting. And once we have a meeting, then obviously it goes from there into a sales process, which is about discovery and matching needs and about proposing and finally closing. So the key in how this all becomes efficient, and we would certainly suggest a variety of modes of marketing, and we'll actually share a marketing funnel in a minute. But the key is about how do we align all of these, because we want to have a variety of ways that a prospect sees us. They need to see us in a few different modes in order for our message to get through. And today, certainly marketing is much more complex than it was even 10 years ago, because the number of modes of marketing have expanded considerably. And so it's really about how do we leverage those modes and also get them to complement each other so that we get the most efficient process possible. So let's talk about the marketing funnel, and probably most of you are familiar with a sales funnel, which is essentially taking us through the stages of a sale, from going from a suspect to a prospect, where we've qualified needs. We've done a variety of discovery elements so that we learn what a specific prospect, what their current situation is, what goals they have, what resources they have, where their gaps are, and then we build a proposal, present a proposal, and then ideally we close and implement. Well, in marketing, there's a similar funnel, and we developed this a bunch of years ago, but it's really 3 basic stages, and there are obviously sub stages and more complexity, but very simply, we want to move from awareness to intimacy to trust. And once we get to trust, that prospect can be converted into a meeting, an appointment, where we can begin the sales process. So awareness can happen through a variety of techniques. And just to give you a sense of some of them, in that top of the funnel, the awareness stage, we have our website. We have a variety of techniques to get people to our website. We can advertise in a variety of different media. There's obviously social media, and there are events where we can sponsor, exhibit, speak, and walk through. But those are all places where a prospect gets their first impression of us. Things that are later in the funnel, where we're building intimacy, where we're building some level of knowledge of the customer or the prospect with our credibility and our potential value proposition for them. We might have webinars like we're doing today. There are white papers, e-news. We might get referrals that somebody has advocated for us, and we're now meeting with somebody who not only has awareness of us, but somebody else has endorsed us. And then from an event standpoint, we can do executive briefings. We can host hospitality events. We can attend various types of education events and so on, where we're able to ask questions or somehow display our expertise in a greater way. There are certainly a lot of different event techniques here. And then in the trust phase, we're really, we may be having dialogues with prospects through various media and so on, but where where we get to that place where that prospect now is at a level of trust. They've seen enough of us, they've had enough impressions where they get to a point where they're now interested and they feel safe in terms of having a meeting and sharing their challenges with us, so that ultimately we can create a solution that works for them. So the bonus section here, and thanks for staying with us to this point, the bonus section actually is critically important and probably one of the most valuable tools for developing your U.S. market entry strategy. So probably many of you are familiar with the business model canvas, this 9-section diagram of essentially a business plan. This tool actually can be very, very helpful for U.S. market entry because it has all of the variables that we need to consider. So the thing that where I think a lot of companies, a lot of founders, a lot of executives get confused with this tool is they look at it as something that it needs to be filled out in one sitting. And we would suggest that it actually, in market entry, in the, let's say, the phase 0 stage, that there are actually only 2 of these segments or 2 of these boxes that need any attention. And so number 1 is the value proposition. What is it we want to provide? What is the value that we want our customers to realize? And who is the customer segment? So who's the fish that we're aiming at? Who's that persona? And then what do we want them to realize as a result of our service or product? And so these, before we come into the market, we need to be really diligent about testing and validating these 2 assumptions about who we're going to be selling to and what it is we're going to be selling to them, what value it is we're going to be selling to them. And value propositions are always expressed from the customer perspective. And this is where a lot of people get confused, is they tend to assume value propositions as opposed to listening to the customer and what they gain from our again, our service or our product. And so the more a value proposition is from a customer's perspective, the more it will relate to the next customer. And that's really important. So we would suggest, as you're working on your plan for U.S. market entry, is really to identify your initial hypotheses around who you're going to be selling to, what's that target fish, eliminate 33,999 and aim at that one target fish that you want to catch, and then what value proposition you feel that they will realize by buying from you or creating a relationship with you. And then that's where you begin your testing, because these are assumptions. Then we need to go out and identify some of those customers and test the value proposition. And we may find that our value proposition stays consistent and who we aim at is the variable. And for others, you may find that what you offer will vary dependent on the customer segment. So again, you want to have greater certainty before you invest, before you make a formal entry, so that you can gain traction quicker. You can, again, the effort of the people you're committing to the greater process. And so that they have wins, so that their commitment stays firm, and you can grow and scale with a sort of high predictability. So we started this with the guy with the rocket on his back, and again, the whole idea is to help you find a path to get traction and scale quickly in the U.S. market. As I stated at the beginning, it's a large and complex market. And probably like the adage that's been around for years, and the question is, how do you eat an elephant? And the response is, one bite at a time. We don't eat the elephant in the whole elephant in one bite. We eat little bits at a time because it's big, and we need to have we need to have the capacity and energy to process that, and so much better to start small, build incrementally, both because you want to have testing and sort of accuracy in terms of what creates your scale, but also your operations going to need to get in place, get tested. You want to obviously validate that you can deliver the service or product easily and seamlessly to your customers, because this isn't just about selling, it's about retaining customers, which takes a lot of effort as well. So it's been really great to be with you today. Here's my contact information. Certainly, if there are questions, love to answer questions. And if you have interest in learning more about our service, happy to share that as well. We specialize in helping B2B, international B2B companies exhibit at U.S. trade shows, leverage U.S. events, and gain strategic connections throughout the U.S. So again, very happy to have additional conversation, and just reach out anytime. And it's been a real pleasure to be with you all today, and certainly wish you a great day and huge success in the U.S. market.